From the Rose City in beautiful downtown Portland, Oregon, home of bikes, books, bridges, beards, food carts, startups, and indie coffee. Grab your dog, snatch your hammer and beer, leave your umbrella at home. Welcome to the Tiny House Podcast.
It's the Tiny House Podcast. I'm Perry.
I'm Michelle.
And this is Mark.
Wow.
That was the best Mark introduction we have had in 100 episodes.
Absolutely, I agree.
I put on my radio voice.
Exactly.
Hey, listeners. That was Kim Carnes with Betty Davis Eyes. Oh,
Do our listeners know that you have a radio background?
probably not.
Yeah, probably not. Although wasn't the radio background like sales only?
No, I did.
Oh, you
I
did,
did.
Mike?
I was on a couple of radio stations, AM and FM, early on.
Oh, right.
Remember, I told you the one story about the
But
cops
the night
and
show? Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's right.
the underage girl and the booze and the guns and stuff.
And we've got a reverend on the show. Maybe you can give a confession.
Yeah. We don't have time for that. It's
That
just a
was-
45-minute show.
That was one of your best stories. I gotta admit.
Thank you.
It was a good one.
That was a great
actually.
story.
My kids haven't heard that one yet. I'll wait till they have kids of their own. So they won't.
Exactly.
So they won't emulate
Exactly.
the dads
Small awkward moment.
Exactly. So what's in the news, the tiny house movement, Michelle? Since you are the connection that we have.
Oh, thank you. So the House Bill, Oregon State House Bill
That's
2737 has passed the Senate and is currently on the governor's desk for signature.
Woohoo!
So on one hand, yes, we'd love to party. It didn't end up, however, being quite what the tiny house movement wanted. The Senate version of the bill it got chopped up a little bit. So long story short, conversations continue to happen. Progress continues to be made. This is one of those sort of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. However, also almost more exciting, however, was literally yesterday, the state of Idaho actually fully adopted Appendix V.
That's the one I saw on Facebook.
Yeah, that was making the rounds yesterday. So very excited about that. Yeah.
Very cool. And how's your build going?
I've had a little bit of a slowdown on my second build on Perch, just because of the fact that I had to sort of change direction a little bit to start on the third house. It's going fine. My landlord actually, it was funny because he hasn't really been making the improvements to the site where it's going to be put. And yesterday he's out there with a tractor and the blade, and he's out there flattening and asking me, when, okay, the gravel's going to come, and he's got to put up the tent pole. And so, yeah, it's nice to see him. He's like, making lots of noise out there. You're making lots of noise out there. I guess I better get started on my stuff. Yeah, I guess you better. You got a little time here, but I'm still 2 steps ahead of him. So
Very cool.
we got all the built-in shelving is all in now. I'm ready for insulation and drywall. Super excited.
Where are you building it? Are you building it on site where it will be, or are you building up north?
The Perch is actually on site where it will be, which is also adjacent to where I live. And then the third build is actually up north.
Cool.
And I have some new sponsors as well. So that build is going to start. Again, you do all this prep work and it feels like nothing's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And you just do all the prep work and collect the materials
Right.
and contact the sponsors and figure out your build site and check the list of tools. And then all of a sudden, boom, it's going to go really fast. But
Since the sponsors are making it happen, and Mark, you can just shake your head if you don't agree with what I'm about to offer.
Uh-oh.
Would it be a good idea for your sponsors if you were to mention them here?
All 28 of them?
Not all.
Okay.
Not all 28.
actually, I think I'm at 40.
Okay.
Okay, we'll forget it then. Maybe roll out the top 2 today.
Yeah, let's do this.
Yeah.
Just give your favorite.
Good one.
Well, then today I'd like to shout out to
There you go.
Mr. Plywood. Mr. Plywood is a local lumber supplier, local hardware store here in Portland. They were my framing and siding sponsor for the Perch, and very generous and very, very supportive. And it really changes the way that you view their business model. Changes the way that you view lumber shopping. Right?
Right.
You go to Home Depot, you ask a question no one really knows. The lumber is not that great all the time. Anyways, shout out to Mr. Plywood.
And they're local, right?
Yes,
Not
yeah.
in Detroit.
No.
Okay.
No, I got it.
I know. It was a slow handoff.
It was a good slow handoff. In keeping with that, we're gonna talk real slow about this transition. No, so Michelle's got this fabulous build going on, and there's another fabulous build going on a much grander scale in a community that really needs it, which is the community of Detroit. Our guest today, Reverend Faith Fowler, is. I hesitated because I just thought in my head, is spearheaded offensive for a reverend? No, it's not. Who is spearheading this initiative? Reverend Faith Fowler.
Faith.
I have Faith written. Is it Faith or Faye?
Faith.
Faith. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Which is it's kind of like Dr. Tooth. It's for a dentist. It's the perfect name for a reverend. Reverend, welcome to. Can I call you Faith or should I just say Reverend?
Faith is fine.
Okay, thank you. That makes it so much easier for me.
Assuming he can remember.
Yeah, exactly. So welcome to the show, Faith.
Thanks.
Yeah, and you are part of, it's called CAS Community Social Services.
Right.
And you guys are an outcrop, if I may use that word, of the United Methodist Church there. Is that correct?
Yeah, we started as part of Cass Methodist Church in what was called the Cass Corridor of Detroit. In 2002, we started a separate nonprofit called Cass Community Social Services. So it's linked, but it's separate as well.
And so I guess we should get right to the point, although probably everyone who's listening to this show already knows about your project because your project has gone viral.
The last couple of weeks, tons of people have tagged me. And have you seen this? This is so cool.
They're really loving it. But for in the purpose of, or even though it's going to be redundant, let's talk about the project that you're doing. So you have this fantastic community development that is 100% tiny house based, and you're offering tiny house living to, I think it's low income people.
Yeah, it's a combination of formerly homeless and senior citizens who are low income, and then students who've aged out of foster care. We wanted a diversity within the community, and that made sense for our area.
So, fantastic. So I'm sorry about the pregnant pause there, but I was just thinking, I don't want to embarrass you, Michelle,
No, it's
but
okay.
Didn't you come out of foster care or was it something else? That's what I thought. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So awesome. So I thought you were going to say something. Sorry. So okay. So
We are ill prepared as usual.
it's just we're so spontaneous. Sometimes the spontaneity gets a little off the rails. So that's fantastic. And the people who have the fantastic opportunity to live in these tiny homes, they pay rent for 7 years, and at the end of those 7 years, they end up owning the home. Is that correct?
Correct. So they were building houses between 250 and 400 square feet. So their rent is based on square footage. They pay $1 per square foot, so $250 to $400 a month. Their only other bill is electric/heat, which in Michigan in the coldest months should be less than $35 a month. So it's very inexpensive or affordable for people, and gives them the chance to own an asset or to establish wealth. Which is pretty important. I mean, a lot of people have been talking about income inequality, but asset inequality is probably even more important, because if you have an income but you run into a crisis, your car breaks down or your hours are cut or somebody gets sick, then you go back to being homeless or back to being very vulnerable. With an asset, you of course can use it as collateral or sell it and do something with it. It gives you a whole new vantage point, if you will.
The asset nature of this program, do they get to own the land too, or just the house?
Yeah. So for 7 years, there are a couple program requirements as well. They receive a financial coach to help them deal with debt, establish a budget, set up accounts, help them explore if there are ways for them to make more money, which is rare. Most affordable housing in the United States, if you make more money, you pay more rent, or if you make too much more money, they ask you to leave. We think if you make more money, good for you, and we'll try and help you think of ways you can use it to make the money make money for you. In addition to that, they go to a home ownership class that helps them not only deal with living in a smaller space in some cases, but also, how do you maintain a facility if you're used to being a renter? How do you deal with cleaning the gutters or changing the furnace filters or preparing for the season changes?
I need
and then
that
I'm sorry, what was that?
She said she needed that class.
I think I need that class.
I definitely needed it when I bought a house, and I think everybody does. But if you come from a long line of renters, you certainly didn't get it from your family.
Yeah.
So including those kinds of lessons. And then lastly, they're expected to volunteer 8 hours a month to a newly established CB patrol, a community patrol, so that they start spending time with other people in the community, and they're seen as an asset in the larger community. Has us excited. So if they do those things for 7 years, mostly compliant, we will ask them to join the homeowners association. They, by the way, are the ones who help establish the rules for the homeowners association. And if they say yes, then we give them the house and the land.
That's really amazing. So let's be very, just to clarify, are all these houses are on foundations, right? Every single one of them?
Yeah, absolutely, Michelle. They're all on slab on grade. In Detroit, this neighborhood, I should probably describe for you, has 300 vacant lots and 500 dilapidated buildings. So there's a lot of nothing. And when it was full of houses, they were built in the 1915, 16, 17s. The last structure to be built in this neighborhood before the tiny houses was 1974, and it was a garage.
Wow.
Since then, everything has come down. So we bought 25 vacant lots from, well, one had a house, but everything else was vacant from the city for $15,000. And each house will go on its own lot, which is why we didn't have to struggle with zoning or variances, because it's a residential neighborhood. It just didn't have any houses. And each house is on roughly a 30 by 100 foot lot. So they'll have nice big backyards. And every single house is different. So that, I think, distinguishes it from most affordable housing as well. That we've tried to make them attractive and distinguishable so that people have great pride in where they live.
So there are housing styles in the video. There's like a stucco Tudor, and there's a modern one with a flat roof and an overhang in the front, and then there's one more traditional with gables and all that crap. Are those the actual? Are
Fine details. I mean, yeah.
Are those the actual houses, or are those just models?
No. So all the houses are different. 7 are up so far. We're starting 3 more next month and 3 more in August. And we have a Tudor, and we have a Victorian, and we have a flat roofed one. We have a Cape Cod. So intentionally they're very, very different. Because Detroit, in its history, has been a city of single-family homes, and they were different. It wasn't like a subdivision in many suburbs today where you can go down and there's 3 models repeated over and over.
Right.
Can you tell us about the economic realities? Tell us a little bit about Detroit as a city, as a neighborhood, or their neighborhoods, and talk about the economic realities that sort of gave you the opportunity to buy that much land for that cheap.
Yeah, and that's something.
That's amazing.
So, yeah, that's the good news. The bad news is in our zip code, the poverty rate is 44%. So we have some really tremendous things happening downtown, midtown, Corktown. You've probably read about the companies moving in and the young professionals moving in and the retirees, and that's all true and to be celebrated. But conversely, the neighborhoods haven't had that sort of investment or attention, and so you have large pockets of abandoned land, blighted buildings, and poor people. So to add 25 houses to the taxpayer rolls is good for the city. It's good for the neighborhood. We've had people standing in our bushes, peering in the windows because they're so excited to see inside. We have people driving down the street with their smartphones out the windows, video recording everything. It just so that halfway through a grant, they decide to slash it or eliminate it, and then I would have made a promise to somebody that I couldn't keep. So we decided right from the get-go that we would raise it privately. Some family foundations, the Ford Motor Fund, the Community Foundation, McGregor Fund, churches have stepped up in a major way, the Junior League of Detroit, Flagstar Bank. I mean, there's a number of organizations that have really made significant contributions to making these happen. We were constructing them using a combination of professional trades to pour the foundations and build the shell and put on the roof and electrical and plumbing. Anything that's either requires a permit or is part of the shell. And then we use volunteers to do everything else. Mm-hmm. The drywall, the flooring, the cabinet building, the furniture assembly, the landscaping, the deck and porch building, the fence erecting, because it takes a little longer. It really does, but it saves us a ton of money, which will allow us to build more homes. So that's it.
But these volunteers, they know what they're doing, I presume.
Yeah, we have a volunteer coordinator with history with Rebuilding Together, so he supervises them to make sure that if you say you can drywall, you really know how to do it.
Good. Yeah.
Or if you haven't laid a floor before, that he'll give you instructions and watch you do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a quality house. Mm. The other thing is we've been able to talk to homeowners and business owners into giving us either materials they're taking out or leftover from a job. Mm-hmm. So we've gotten stones and shingles and pavers. And the first time I went to speak at a suburban house, at the end, an older woman said, "We're redoing our kitchen. Can you use our old granite countertops?"
Wow.
and I got my
one of those 5 years old.
So the homeowner got a tax write-off, and we got to put in really nice granite countertops, and everybody wins. It keeps it out of the dumpster, I suppose.
Yeah.
As well.
So Michelle had that good question about where the fundings come from. My question is, how do you I still want to say it this way, so I'm going to say it. How do you keep back the roving hordes that want to live in these places? I imagine you have way more people wanting to live in them than you have houses to put them in.
Absolutely.
Duck, goose.
Why didn't I think of that? We accepted applications in the month of October and received 122 completed. Since then, we've had 800 inquiries that we've had to turn down.
Wow.
As we've been building, everybody's been watching, and now more and more, and plus the social media attention in particular, more and more people are aware of it and are wanting to get in. So we're really happy that people want. Interestingly enough, at an early board meeting before the business plan was done, one of my board members said, "Do you think anybody will really live in these? They're about the size of my garage." I remind him now that, at least 1,000 people want to live there.
Yeah. So do you, I presume because these are tiny houses and my familiarity with them is that it would be, although people do have their families living in them, do you accept families to live in these tiny houses, or is it only individuals?
For the first 25, they're really built for individuals or couples, and I like to say you better love the other person very If we're lucky enough to have round 2, we'll build for families, and by that I mean you have to have bedrooms for kids that are separate from parents. So we'd probably go 4 to 550, which isn't the smallest tiny home, but I want kids to have separate bedrooms, and I think we'll get there. We just won't get there this year.
Mm-hmm. Is the 7-year time frame, is that related to Jubilee at all?
Well, I am a minister,
Good answer.
Good pull.
Good pull.
Yeah, nice.
We wanted long enough to make sure they'd have a financial track record and feel secure in themselves that once we had them take over the bills, they wouldn't lose their house to back taxes or delinquent water. There's no mortgage, so there'd be no foreclosure that way. But those are the primary ways people lose their homes in Detroit, and we wanted to make sure they had enough payment on time, the right amount, so that they could keep the houses as long as they want. And yet we didn't want to stretch it out to a 15 or 30-year mortgage type cycle, because if you've been homeless, that's probably more than you can think possible.
Yeah.
So we tend to be, as you can tell, a pretty fun-loving show. But in startup realities, you're going to have some challenges in 7 years. How do you kind of have baked in or built in here to deal with stuff as people may start having some challenges in year 3 or 4 or 5?
Right. So if there are financial challenges, they have a coach who's going to work with them all the way along to, did you lose your job? Well, let me help you explore what else is out there. Or did you increase in income? Let's try and figure out a second source of income so that you stay afloat. If they're, getting along, how you negotiate in the neighborhood, that would come more under the home ownership classes and that person who interfaces with them. And then we'll have the monthly group meeting where we try and resolve issues. We run other housing programs, so we have some experience doing that. So we're fairly confident we'll be able to address their needs.
How long have you been a minister, Faith?
32 years.
And did you say you lived in Detroit all your life?
I lived in Detroit until I was 12, and then I lived in a suburb until I went away to college. And then I've been back as a minister since 1996.
And what is it about?
86. I'm sorry.
86. Okay. Yeah.
Terry was doing math.
I was up there in my head trying to figure it out myself.
Yeah.
And so, what is it about this project that strums your strings, rings your bells, hits your drums? I don't know how to say it.
Well, I think it's the first thing. So CAST does 4 things ordinarily: food, housing, healthcare, and jobs. And we started the jobs during the recession when our people just couldn't get work at all. And I was really excited about that and still am. But we learned through the process of people having the jobs and becoming more financially secure that again, if one setback, one bump in the road means that they could lose everything and revert back to homelessness. And so I started thinking about, what could help them obtain an asset. And then there's the second part, sort of in tandem, happened. My mom died, and in the process, I inherited some things, and my brother and nephew inherited a house. And it dawned on me for the first time that I always in my life had that safety net, that security of being able, if I was in trouble, being able to go to my parents and saying help. And they may have given me a really long lecture about, how irresponsible it was to not save for a rainy day and all that good stuff. But I always knew they'd bail me out. If you're poor, you don't have that. You don't have anybody leaving you anything when they die. And you don't have the security of knowing you can turn to your family. It's not that their families don't love them. They do. They don't have the ability most of the time to bail them out. And so I saw this as a generational game changer of allowing them to climb the ladder and provide not only for themselves, but potentially for their children and grandchildren in a way that many of us in the United States just expect.
Do you see the people that this project is designed for? Do they span racial diversity, or is it a predominant?
Absolutely. It's more black than white, but yes, there is racial diversity. Obviously, there's both genders. There's ages from 24 to 80. So there's really a nice and rich combination of people who should be able to help each other in ways probably I or we can't even. So we're excited about that part of it too, and yet recognizing that we wanted them to be integrated into the larger neighborhood. We didn't want people to say that's where the homeless live, or that's where the poor people live, or wanted them to be a part of the larger community and to be seen as a part of the revitalization of this larger community, a neighborhood that hasn't been experienced the kind of resurrection that, say, the downtown area has.
Morgan, we have interviewed people before who are doing similar things to what you're doing. There's an organization in Olympia, Washington, for example, that has a village that you might be familiar with. When we talk with those people, one of the questions we ask, and I'm going to ask you too, is what do you say to people who say that the homeless problem isn't always solvable by giving people a home, because the homeless problem is more often not a problem of not having a home than it is some other kind of problem?
So
I I've been to Coyote, and it's a beautiful program. It's different, but it's a great program, and I applaud them. We're not suggesting that we are ending homelessness. We are not recommending this as the only answer to homelessness. We are saying that there are some people who are ready to move on with their lives, to move out of the shelters or the transitional housing programs, who don't have any way to become a homeowner, who are locked into renting their entire life and consequently will be vulnerable their entire life when they don't have to be, when they really can rejoin society in a way where they're contributors and stakeholders and community members. And so that's what we're trying to do. We recognize it's not for everybody. I tell a story at the beginning of the book. We've written a book about this to help other people figure out what they want to do. But anyway, I tell the story at the beginning of the book of my grandfather who had throat cancer, and they were able to operate on it and give him, many years of more life. My father had pancreatic cancer, and they weren't able to do anything, and it took his life. So it's like people saying, well, if you can't cure all cancers, we shouldn't cure any. Well, no. If you have the cure to one kind, you should do it. If it's going to help people and save people. The same thing is, not everybody's homeless for the same reason. Not everybody who's come through this shelter system has the same situation. There are some who can be helped by this program. I think a large number who can be helped by this program, and others who are poor who can be helped by this program. And consequently, we're ready to try it.
The program is, the rents that people pay are based on their income. You had said that before, I think.
No, that's on the square
footage.
House.
You're right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where are these people, and I'm coming totally from ignorance here, where are these people going to get jobs?
Okay, so there's a couple of things. Just because you're homeless doesn't mean you don't have an income. Some people who are homeless have SSI, Social Security entitlement payments, to the tune of about $750 a month. Some people have part-time jobs. Some people have minimum wage jobs. So some people leave our homeless shelter and go to work every day and come back at night. Or they go from our transitional program and go to work and come back at night. They just don't have enough money to qualify for a mortgage. Even if they save up the down payment, even if they have the closing costs, nobody's going to give them, for instance, a Habitat house in Detroit, could be $150,000 more. Who's going to give you a mortgage for that amount of money if you make $10,000 a year?
Yeah.
So we had to come up with a way to eliminate the mortgage, and this is what we're trying.
Wow.
I read an article on the internet that really changed my perspective about being poor. And I have been poor, not now by any stretch of the imagination, but I have been there. And it's difficult and interesting to explain to other people. You mentioned, for instance, if your car breaks down or something, and that becomes this sort of spiral that kind of sends you. And it was that story about someone had a car and their car broke down, and they went back a couple of days later, to go get it. They didn't have insurance. They didn't have I just call it a towing company now, but they didn't have that. And they went back a couple days later and the car had actually been towed. So then they went to get their car out of the tow yard, and it was actually like a $700 or $800 bill just to get the broken car out of the tow. And so then they didn't have a car. And then they said, well, now I have to take the bus to work. But that was an inordinate amount of time to and from work. So they were late constantly, or they would miss a bus. And then they lost their job because they didn't have that sort of that supportive system around getting to and from that location at that time. Anyways, the story was really just about how when you are poor, one fairly small thing that other people would think, oh, I've got a credit card, or I just called the towing company, AAA. Turns into this life-altering experience that just spirals downward. That was a very, very interesting article for me. I mean, again, be able to put it in words to other people in real life terms what being poor means. I'm also one of those people that can't call my parents and and say, oh, by the way, my car broke down, or I can't reach out to them for support. Or so I've actually, I've been there. I've been there. And so I appreciate the notion that just because you're poor or just because you're actually homeless, which I have been, doesn't mean you don't have a job.
Yeah.
It just doesn't mean, and it doesn't mean you'll never have a home, obviously, but it just doesn't mean you don't have one right now.
Yeah.
You just need that break. And what I see this program is that break, that set of people that step up and say, okay, we're going to give you that break. We're going to give you that support that you've never had right now, and giving people the opportunity to step up.
Well said.
Yeah.
So I'm almost emotional hearing you talk about the program.
Thank you, Michelle.
Can you, without giving away any privacy matter, if you can't do this, that's okay. But I'm just curious, without giving away any privacy identifying characteristics, can you give an example of a type of person who would be living in these homes?
So one person had a job mid 50s. It was low paying, and then discovered he had epilepsy. And so now in his mid 50s, he can't work. He can draw Social Security, but that's it. And so in the middle of his life, he's homeless, even though he's done everything right. He's gone to school. He's tried to save. And for him, this tiny home and the chance at owning something means he doesn't have to be scared anymore. When you've had it and lost it, and you don't know how you're going to make your way out of it, and you're sick, just trying to manage medications, and you're not feeling well enough to work anywhere, even to cook sometimes.
Or care.
Yeah, I mean, so it really is just a miracle to him.
Yeah.
I don't know any other way to describe it. It's a lifesaver thrown off a ship when he felt like he was drowning.
Where was he? Where is he while the house is being put together? Where is he now?
We've got him set up living with a family temporarily.
I see.
Yeah. But he's ready to move in. He keeps calling me.
Tired of sleeping on someone else's couch. So you talked a little bit about the success of the program and the social media exposure. For people that live in tiny houses, it's pretty common for people to drive by and take pictures and peek in the windows and knock on the front doors. To what extent has that sort of either changed your conviction or changed your plan for the future? Like, is the next phase of this project going to be a little bit more on the DL? Are you finding the popularity to be a double-edged sword, that it's sort of distracting?
So far, it hasn't been a double-edged. We didn't expect either time it went viral. We didn't expect it. The first time David Wolf did, took a video of ours and put it together with somebody else's, and it went out. So that it ended up with 13 million views, which meant that we were contacted from everywhere and had about 6,000 comments to respond to. And really, the book is in reaction to that, trying to answer their questions, because many of them were good questions. Then more recently, Now This did a video, and it's in 10 days has like 27 million views. So the good news is people are asking for advice and for us to come speak about the project various places so that we can be evangelists of it, if you will. The other thing is it meant that we added a component into our screening process, during which we explained very explicitly to potential residents, you're going to be living in a fishbowl. That people are going to drive by and take videos. They're going to walk by and take pictures. They may step on your lawn. They may ask to come into your house. You have the right to say no. You don't have the right to cuss them out, but you have the right to say no. Because I'm fearful, and I've seen this happen in some other places, I'm fearful that the media will overwhelm them with requests for interviews and wanting to tell a story about triumph over whatever. So we wanted them to be clear that they don't have to do it, and if they do it once, they don't have to do it again. They can do it if they want to, obviously, but I don't think they have any idea what it would mean to do 100 interviews in a month, and it could be that.
Yeah.
So we've tried to warn them. We'll walk with them through the process, and we'll see.
Give them a media release, and they can tell the media it's $500.
Kind of like the house for sale box that you see out front where you have the little one page FAQ.
Yeah, it's just a press release.
Exactly, a press release in every front yard.
And a Dropbox for the money.
Exactly.
No checks,
No
please.
plastic.
Exactly.
Yeah, if you really want to contribute to my quality of life.
Exactly. Faith, did you think that when you were putting this together that it was going to be as widely praised or looked at or reported as it is now?
No, not really. I knew that it confirmed that the problem we were trying to solve is a universal one and not one specific to Detroit. As I say, we've been to speak in Pennsylvania. We talked to people at the affordable housing in Michigan. We're going out to Colorado. I mean, so we're going all over the United States trying to help people think what is transferable to where they are and what makes sense. Obviously, we're not the only model. We're the only home ownership model, but there are other models that they might consider and adapt. So, I just like that it solves multiple problems at one time. Poverty is complex, and solutions, I think, should be complex as well. So you're repopulating a neighborhood. You're making taxpayers for the city. You're doing much less harm to the environment. You're building them into the existing community that needs support. I mean, all these things are really good. And when you can align the stars that way, it's a good day.
So also tagging off that sort of line of questions about your popularity. You've obviously been asked every single question under the sun. Is there any burning subject? Is there any burning question you want to answer? Again, we're very reverent. We're out there. So is there anything that you want to say to somebody, or is there any question that you want to answer that hasn't been asked yet?
I'm really glad you asked about the homeless and income, to tell you the truth, because many, many people don't understand that. No, I think in some of the feedback, some of the posts online, I'm surprised at how angry folks are that we're not doing this for middle class people or that we're not doing it in other states. We've gotten some really nasty letters and emails about, well, why aren't you doing it other places?
Wow. Faith, say more about that. What is their complaint? That there's middle class poor? Is that what they're saying?
Yeah, no, what they're saying, and I understand that, because this is where the country is right now, that many people have been working jobs for long periods of time, and they're still renting because the cost of housing continues to be inflated. But there's nothing to say you couldn't build your tiny house and be middle class. So I'm hoping by the end of the day, people will give that some more thought, that you don't have to buy a $150,000 or $200,000 or $250,000 home to be happy, that you can be perfectly happy in a tiny home, even if it's in a different location, or even if it's not part of an existing community, that we really don't need all the crap we have. That if you think about the rooms in your houses you live in now, it's probably a couple. And if you got rid of a lot of the stuff and you didn't have the mortgage for 30 years, you might enjoy life more. I mean, in that sense, I'm hoping our little community has a lesson to teach. I know that the tiny home movement has been proclaiming that for quite a while, but I don't know. We did a progressive tour through the houses before moving people in as a way to raise money. We had 500 people go through in 3 days, and almost every one of them said to me at the end, I could live in this. I could live in this. So they hadn't even thought about it before.
Right.
It was just obscene to them or foreign to them, and yet people, in different countries live in this sort of space now.
It's so interesting, Faith. This is a common refrain of many of the people we've interviewed on the show. And it's interesting too that the opposite refrain occurs in the comment sections of articles about this kind of living. The people who are advocates for it are like, this is the greatest way to free yourself from the system that is oppressing so many people. And on the other side, the people who haven't realized that freedom are like, how could you possibly do that? Even people like that one celebrity, what's his name?
He did the show.
The African-American guy who runs Family Feud, what's his name? Steve
Harvey, there we go.
You know, and it's just this common refrain that many Americans still have not gotten over, which is you have to have the big house, you have to have the car, you have to have stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Has someone sent the link to him yet? I'm going to take the action item to make sure the link to this video gets to his inbox.
That's a really good idea.
Because I think that's even his part of town.
Yeah,
like, you know,
exactly.
Is
he in Detroit?
I don't know.
I thought he was in Chicago, but anyway.
I'm just saying that, you know, this should be right up his alley. Like the video or this plan almost like checkbox off of all of his sort of issues
all with the complaints.
Exactly, all of his issues.
Well, it's interesting that the middle class is coming to faith and saying, how come you guys aren't doing this for us? Because I think the middle class is beginning, at least some segments of it, are beginning to see how much of a hamster wheel it can be to own so much crap.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely.
I think the people that are also commenting in a more angry fashion have just found an outlet for their to vent their frustration. I wouldn't even go so far as to say they definitely expect her, you know, like to do their stuff in other states. But I almost want to comment and say, I hope that your response, Faith, to those types of comments is sort of like hashtag be the change.
Yeah, exactly.
Sitting on your computer and complaining about what we're doing on our side of the town and being mad that we're not doing it on your side. Like, I call your congressman, you know, talk to your pastor, go to the city council.
Or just make it happen.
Yeah, just make it happen.
Look at what you're doing. I mean, just make things happen.
Well, and the challenge is a lot of people don't know how.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, not everyone is a Reverend Faith.
Yeah, no. I was saying, tell them to be the change, and then never mind.
Exactly.
Oh, I got to work? Nah. You skip that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's too hard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's too hard to walk and talk and be what we want to be when we grow up.
Yeah.
So the other thing we had to fight for, really, just quickly, is to have every house different. That we dealt with architects and builders. Oh, it'd be so much cheaper. It'd be so much easier. And it probably would be, but...
if you just pay me to do my design 25 times rather than those other people, don't pay them.
Exactly, Mark. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Sometimes easier and cheaper in the short run is a disaster in the long run.
You got it.
Right.
Yeah, you got it. Well, Faith, it's been fantastic talking with you about your program. It sounds spectacular, and obviously a lot of the world is agreeing with that sentiment. Wish you the best success, although I don't think you need it. You've already got it. If anyone wanted to reach out to you and find out more about your book or about your project, how do they do that?
So the book is at ccpublishinghouse.org, so casscommunitypublishinghouse.org. Or the website is casscommunity.org.
Awesome. And then Tiny House. Oh, we need to acknowledge our sound guy.
You know how you listeners notice how good this sounds right now?
Why is that, Mark?
Thank you, Rick McNerney.
Who's that?
That's our sound guy from Brooklyn, New York.
And how did we meet Rick?
He was wearing a kilt in Colorado.
Yeah, chased us down.
He kind of stood out.
He did. It was
he like literally like chased us through the field in Colorado with a kilt on. Nice guy. I mean, we appreciate all of our listeners that reach out and offer us comments and feedback and let us know how we're doing. But we really, really appreciate Rick and offering to actually
make us sound better.
Be the change.
Yeah, exactly.
That's my new thing. Maybe instead of namaste, right?
Yes.
That didn't go over very well.
So, Rick, thank you very much for what you're doing for the show. It's improved the quality tremendously. And then, folks who are listening to this show, thank you too, because without you, we would not have a show. So, we really appreciate that. And tune in next week when we'll be talking with someone we don't know who that is. I don't think at this moment.
It's at this stage. It's kind of a wild card.
I'm glad Faith's having a good time with
Yes.
Yep.
Well, okay, to our defense, sometimes we know who it is, but we don't want to say because it's not like confirmed, firmed. You know,
Sure.
like they're like, yeah, sure, I'd like to be on. Yeah, let's do it. And then you find out later, they're like, oh, that was today.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So yeah, sometimes we get ourselves a little far extended, but nonetheless, we have a good time. So that's
Yeah.
the important part.
That's the important part. And we got good stories. Anyway, check us out next week. Bye, everybody.
Hashtag be the change.
I was going to say that. God bless it.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Tiny House Podcast. To find us online, go to tinyhousepodcast.com, where you will also find our show notes, if we remember to put them there. Our logo was designed by the amazing Carolyn Main. Our website is hosted by the gang at Sitecast. Our theme music is by Oma Studio. Please go to iTunes and give us a 5-star rating, or whatever, you tiny house loving bastard. Tiny House Podcast is proudly made in Portland, Oregon.